Hi all, welcome to the channel Cloud Knowledge. Today in this video, we'll study about export and import in Azure SQL database, where we will export or create a backup package file which is called as Bacpac. In this scenario, we will create a .bacpac file which contains database schema and data, and the primary use of it is to move a database from one server to another. Okay, so what is this Bacpac? Bacpac is a backup package file with the extension .bacpac. It contains database schema and data. Okay, so if the requirement is to move a database from one server to another, then we create a Bacpac file. Okay, we export that database into the form of that file, we store it in storage account, and then we import it. So we will study about the export of the Bacpac. So in order to export the schema and data of the database using this Bacpac, we need to have a database. So I've already created a database called export.db. So if we go to the Azure portal here, we already have this export.db which we are going to export. And if we go inside this database, under the overview section, we have the option at the top as export. Okay, so if we click on export, file name is shown here at the top. Okay, it is created on the basis of that date. You can give the file name as per your choice too. So the file name is given by default with the date and year, month, date and time. Okay, so we can give it as per our choice. So we'll leave it as is, subscription selected. Then comes the storage. Okay, so in exporting the database, premium is not supported, it's written. So we will select the storage. If you already have a storage account, okay, you select that. If not, create a storage account. So let's select the storage. I'm going to select this Cloud Knowledge into storage, and I have a folder created here as import export. So I'll select import export and just select it. So it will show under the storage section. Then authentication type is SQL Server. That means server admin login. So it is already there
for the export database.
Then click OK. So the request you can see is submitted to export the database. Okay. If the request is submitted, how we'll track whether the request is completed or not? So for that purpose, in the SQL database, we have to go to the server. So in the overview page, we have the server name here. If we click on the server, it will take us to the export.db server. So this is the SQL server. And here under the data management section, in the import and export history, we can see the progress. So let's click there. So it is showing us the operation in progress as export database, export.db. We are going to export, and the status is currently running. Progress is 1%. Completion time is shown here. So let's wait for this export to complete. So the export is in progress. We'll go to the same database, export.db. Okay, and here we'll go inside the query editor. Okay, so let's go inside the query editor, allow the IP, now login, and here we will see the contents of the database. So if we open the table section, we have two tables, employee and students. Okay, so once we have exported, and then we will next do the import of that Bacpac file. So after import also, in the new database, we should see these contents. What means we should be able to see the data as well as the schema in the import database. So we have got the idea of the source, that is the export DB, that it has two tables, employee and students. Okay, let's go back and see the import export history. So it says the status is completed. Okay, here now if this is completed, we'll go to the storage account and we will see the status of this file. Okay, so let's go home and we will go to the resource group and we'll take the storage account cloud knowledge Gen 2 we have selected. We'll go to the containers. And the folder selected was import export. So we could see that the file is generated at the location we said. Okay. So this is done. So our first job is done to export the DB Bacpac, which is having the data and the schema. And we want to now move this database Bacpac into a new SQL server. Okay. So we want to now import it into a new server. Okay. So for that purpose also, I've already created a new database and we will import in the server for that database. So for this purpose, we will use another server. If we go to the export DB, we had the server as export DB server. Now, if we go back here in the resource group, we have another DB called CK SQL DB, and we have a different server for this. Okay, CK SQL DB server. So in this server, we want to now import this Bacpac. Okay, so if we go to the documentation, it says import a Bacpac file to create a new SQL database, and Bacpac file, it contains the schema and data, and this new database will be created from this Bacpac imported from the storage blob container. Means from the storage account we will import this. So let's go to the portal and we are going to import it. So this is the new SQL database and we have the new server as CK SQL DB server. We'll click on the server. Once we click here, we have the option to import database in the overview panel. Okay, so we'll click on import database. The page is loading. So here the options are like subscription, which is selected. Storage, we will select the backup. Okay, in this storage option, we have to give the backup for the import. So let's click on select backup. So it is showing us all the storages. We have our Bacpac file inside this cloud knowledge Gen 2. We'll click and we'll open the folder and we'll select this file. Okay, let's select it. Click on select. Right, so the storage is selected. Now we'll select the database. So the pricing tier is by default showing us the standard series, general purpose. Okay, we'll configure the database. So let's make it serverless. Okay, for infrequent workloads, and auto pause is already set. We'll click apply. So now it is general purpose, serverless. Database name. Okay, here also we have the choice to give the database name. So we can write it as imported export DB. Okay, so this is the imported database which is going to be created from this export DB. Okay, so you can give the database name as per your choice. Collation, let it be default. Authentication type, it will be the SQL authentication. So the admin ID, admin login. So for this particular server, okay, what is the server admin login you have set while creation of this database. So this was my admin and we'll give the password. Okay, so let's click OK. So here you can see that the database import is in progress. It says request submitted to import database. So in some time under data management import export history, we could see that in progress. So let's wait for some time and then we'll click on refresh. So upon clicking refresh, we could see that the operation of import is in progress. We will wait until this completes. This import will take time according to the size of the database, data and schema. So let's wait for its completion. So here we could see that the import is completed. The status shows completed. Since the source database, export database had only 2 tables, this has taken lesser time. So depending upon the size of the data, it will take time accordingly for import operation to complete. So now we'll go and see whether this imported export DB database is created or not. Okay. So in order to see if the database is created, imported export DB under this server, new server, we will just go to home. We'll go inside the resource group, or we could directly perform a global search and search for the SQL databases, okay, which are present here. So we could see here at the bottom, imported export DB is created. So let's click on this and we'll go to the overview section and we could see the server name as CK SQL DB. So this was the server which helped in importing this database, okay, because this was the Bacpac file. So this new server helped in getting the Bacpac file imported as a database in it, okay. So if we go inside the query editor of this database, new database, and if we log in, let's allow the IP. So we have logged in. If we go to the table section, it should have those two tables. So we have these employee and students table imported here. So it is imported along with the data and the schema. Okay. So if we open, it should have the schema as well as the data. So let's query employee. So it is having the data too. So in this video, we have studied about how we can export a database from one SQL server to another SQL server by migrating the data as well as the schema. And this is achieved by creating a .bacpac file, backup package file. And the same file, it is imported into a new SQL server. So we have to make sure that we have a source database for export and a new SQL server for import. Okay. Now, if you want to perform this demonstration yourself, you have to create a SQL database which will have its own server. And then let's create another SQL database which will have a different server. Or you can create a standalone SQL server also. Okay. And then follow the same process. Export, create a Bacpac file inside the storage account. Okay. And then try to import it into that new SQL server. And it should have the schema and the objects. So this is very helpful when we have to perform migration. I hope you have got the concept of export and import in SQL database. Thank you for watching the video. Happy learning. Bye.